All right, let's get into this, because what just happened is one of those moments where global politics, raw emotion, and real-world consequences all collide at once. So here's the situation. Out of nowhere, we get news of a temporary ceasefire in a conflict that's been building serious tension across the globe. Not just a pause in fighting, but something even more critical: the reopening of a major global oil route. And if you understand how the world economy works, you already know that's a huge deal. We're talking about a pressure point that affects fuel prices, supply chains, and ultimately the cost of living for millions of people.
We want to see a resolution of the conflict. The potential of damage to civilian infrastructure in Iran was an extraordinary statement to make. And then also the impact that would have arisen from an escalation with an Iranian response would have led to greater global economic damage. We're already seeing a substantial impact of a war which is on the other side of the world, but is having an impact on Australians here, like it is on citizens throughout the world.
Is this a relief, though, to see that news today?
This is very positive, and we hope that it leads to a permanent de-escalation and an end to the conflict and a resolution that allows the world to go forward, because this is having...
Before we continue, do us a little favour by subscribing to the channel, because over 98% of you watching haven't subscribed. It costs you nothing, not even a penny, to join this channel. Have you subscribed? Thanks so much.
And naturally, the first reaction from leadership was relief. A pause in conflict always is. It's that brief moment where the world collectively exhales and hopes, just hopes, that maybe this time things don't spiral further. But here's where things take a turn. Because just as the situation seemed to calm down, attention shifted to something else entirely. Not missiles, not troop movements, words. And not just any words. Words coming from one of the most influential figures on the global stage. A statement so intense, so loaded, that it immediately sent shockwaves through political circles and beyond. Now, let's be real for a second. In times of conflict, language matters a lot. Leaders aren't just speaking to their own countries, they're speaking to allies, rivals, and millions of people watching from the sidelines. Every word carries weight.
De-escalation and an end to the conflict and a resolution that allows the world to go forward, because this is having a big impact on ordinary citizens in Australia,
that language
as it
about
is in our region.
As the civilization will die tonight, what did you touched on it in your first answer, but what did you make specifically of that language?
I don't think it's appropriate to use language such as that from the President of the United States. And I think it will cause some concern, which is there.
Yeah, when you say some concern, do you mean in Australia or worldwide among allies?
Well, we've said very clearly that the conduct of any conflict must be within international law, and that provides for making sure that civilians who aren't parties to the conflict are given every protection possible.
And you think...
So when rhetoric crosses a certain line, it doesn't just stay as rhetoric, it becomes fuel. And that's exactly why the reaction from leadership, especially from Australia's Prime Minister, was so telling. There was no attempt to sugarcoat it. The message was clear. That kind of language, not okay. And honestly, I agree. Because here's the thing, when tensions are already sky high, the last thing the world needs is language that sounds like it's pouring gasoline on the fire. You don't calm a situation by escalating it verbally. You don't create stability by hinting at destruction. That's not strength, that's recklessness. And let's not pretend words don't have consequences. History has shown us time and time again that rhetoric can shape actions. It can influence decisions. It can push situations from bad to worse in a heartbeat. So when leaders call for extreme language, people pay attention, and not in a good way. Now, to be fair, there's always a gap between what's said and what's actually done. A statement isn't a strike, a tweet isn't a military operation, but that doesn't mean it's harmless. Because perception matters. If allies start feeling uneasy, if global partners begin to question intentions, if markets react out of fear, that's already damage done. You don't need bombs dropping for consequences to kick in. And this is where the bigger picture comes into play. Because while all of this is happening somewhere else, the impact is very real, very local. Rising fuel costs, economic uncertainty, pressure on households, it all trickles down. That's the part people sometimes overlook. Global conflict isn't just about borders, it's about everyday life. It's about how much you pay at the pump, how stable your economy feels, how secure your future looks. So when leaders call for de-escalation, it's not just political talk, it's necessary. And right now, that call seems to be gaining traction. The ceasefire, even if temporary, is a step in the right direction. It shows that despite all the tension, there's still room for dialogue, still room for pulling back from the edge. But let's not get carried away. A temporary pause is not a solution. It's a window, a chance. And what happens next depends entirely on what leaders choose to do with that opportunity. Do they double down on diplomacy, or do they let ego and rhetoric drag things back into chaos? Because if there's one thing this situation has made clear, it's that we're walking a very fine line. Now, there's another layer to all of this that deserves attention, and that's the role of global powers behind the scenes. Conversations happening off camera, negotiations that never make headlines, relationships that quietly shape outcomes. When leaders start engaging in what's described as constructive dialogue, that's usually a sign that something serious is happening beneath the surface. And that's a good thing, because real progress doesn't always happen in front of cameras. Sometimes it's those private discussions that make the biggest difference, the ones where tone shifts, positions soften, and compromises begin to take shape. Still, let's not ignore the complexity here. Global politics isn't black and white. Every country has its own interests, its own priorities, its own strategy. So, while cooperation is possible, it's never simple. But in moments like this, even small steps matter. A ceasefire matters, a conversation matters, a shift in tone matters. And yes, even calling out inappropriate language matters, because it sets a standard, it draws a line, it says this is not how we handle situations this serious. And honestly, that's something we need more of. Not more noise, not more outrage, just more responsibility. Because at the end of the day, the stakes are too high for anything less. So here's the real question. Are we actually moving toward resolution, or is this just a brief pause before things heat up again? I want to hear what you think. Do you believe this ceasefire could lead to something bigger, or is it just a temporary break in a much larger conflict? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Seriously, this is one of those moments where every perspective matters. And if you're into this kind of real talk, no filters, no fluff, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and stay locked in, because we're going to keep breaking these stories down in a way that actually makes sense.